All right, hello everyone. Thanks for being here. Welcome to this webinar, 3 ways to increase your geospatial data processing efficiency. First, I want to thank the New York GIS Association for helping us promote this webinar. As we were last week in, was it last week or the week before that? We were at the, 2 weeks ago, we were at the New York GeoCon event. And it was great. We saw a lot of you guys probably, and we had a few good discussions on FME Server. Hence why we decided to do this this webinar. So today we're going to talk about FME Server a lot. And if you guys are interested to learn more about FME Server, we're actually doing an FME Server webinar series right now, which is like 7 episodes of all the best features in FME Server that we're going to do once a month. So I'm going to put the link to register to this webinar series in the Q&A section. Speaking of which, as you can see on your left, there's a section where you can ask questions. So throughout the whole webinar, you can either raise your hand or ask a question, and I'll do my best to answer it. Oh, and by the way, still haven't introduced myself. I always forget to do that. My name is Marc-Olivier Bourdeau. I'm the marketing coordinator here at Consortec, and I'm going to act as a moderator for this webinar. So if you have any questions, send them out to me in the chat section, and I'll try to have Leslie ask them, answer them during her presentation. So let's get started. Leslie McKenzie, she's the presenter today. Hello, Leslie.
Hi.
So she's going to be doing the presentation. Leslie graduated from McGill University with a Bachelor of Arts in Geography. She's passionate about geomatics and has been working in the field for over 14 years. Her main focus is leveraging ETL with the context of data workflow and process optimization. At Consortec, Leslie provides consulting, training, and solution design services on various GIS and IT platforms, including Selfserve's FME Desktop and, of course, FME Server. Her motivation lies in helping her customers develop automated data workflow processes so they can focus on the fun stuff, the real GIS work. Leslie was one of the first specialists in North America to obtain Selfserve's FME Certified Trainer and FME Certified Professional certifications. So, Leslie, consider yourself welcome. I'm going to say a few words. Here's the agenda for today. The introduction. Oh, sorry. Here's the introduction. The agenda. So, the introduction is almost over. Don't worry. Leslie's going to say a few words on FME, which is the base, and then she'll get going with FME Server, and then we'll show you a few FME Server examples to schedule jobs, automate data processes, and provide on-demand upload and download services, and then we'll go into conclusions and the questions. So just to say a few words on Consortec, who we are exactly. We've been in business for over 30 years. Well, no, not over. This is our 30th anniversary, actually, this year. And we have a team of 10 experts. We have the biggest team of FME certified experts in North America. We are the only Selfserve Platinum partner in North America. And we made over 100 projects of data processes, automations, data integration, application connections, and etc. So we work more with municipality clients and all types of clients in their GIS or IT departments. So all right, that's it for me. So again, if you have any questions, feel free to ask them, and I'll do my best to answer. Leslie will do her best to answer. So Leslie, up to you.
All right, so today what we're going to look at is how municipalities use FME Server to accomplish more, such as automating and orchestrating complex data tasks, data processes in the organization. So I'm going to start with a little bit of what is FME. So FME is a software platform made by Safe Software, and it is a ETL software. So its primary job is to help solve problems with data silos. So the idea of data being in different applications. And what we see more and more is those applications can be a mix of on-premise data applications, could be in the cloud. And, FME comes out of a GIS space, but more and more we're seeing it really used to help integrate data between GIS and other applications. So, it's often taking data from, another application such as a permitting application and planning. It could be an asset management, work order management, and then integrating with GIS data to produce a variety of different types of information. So FME works a little bit like this. So, we can pull data from various sources, and the idea being to, push data to, the GIS department, could be the permitting department, finance. The idea is to be able to let data flow within the organization in as much an automated way as possible. So what is FME software-wise? So we saw that it's a data integration platform, but it comes in 3 different forms. So it comes in FME Desktop. So FME Desktop, the one that you see on the left, is a graphical application for building these data workflows. So I'm going to start with that today because you build the data workflows using FME Desktop, but you deploy them in your organization using either FME Server or FME Cloud. So FME Server is an enterprise application that allows you to automate these data workflows. So you build a data workflow and then you build an automation around it. Does it run on a schedule? Does it run in response to another action? Does another application call it? And FME Cloud is very similar to FME Server, but it is a hosted application. So it's actually a SaaS, and it's an interesting option to deploy FME Server when most of your applications reside in the cloud. So what does it allow us to do, FME? It allows us to connect to our data sources, transform, and automate our workflows. So FME is essentially an ETL, and it started with a GIS-centric application. So this is just to give you guys an example of like the breadth of what it supports. I don't usually like to go spend too much time on this, but just to show that, originally, we used to talk about which formats it supports, but now we talk about types of formats. So anything that has, especially a spatial component, but it's very used now in just pure database conversions. So, tabular, CAD data, raster imagery, 3D BIM, point clouds, and now we're getting a bit more, now they're moving more into IoT and even some gaming formats that you might take spatial data and, send in like Minecraft and games like that, indoor mapping. So it has, a plethora of types of formats. So today FME supports, maybe somewhere around 400 or 500 formats, depending on, with support for APIs, anything that has a REST or a SOAP API, FME can basically support it. So if we talk about the desktop application, which is where we create these automated data flows, it's basically a graphical tool that allows me to create a data process. It allows me to read data, do stuff to that data, and then write it somewhere. So it's an ETL application, extract, transform, and load. So I'm just going to show that same process, but in the FME workbench. So this is an example of an FME data workflow. So I see here the large colored boxes are called bookmarks, and they allow me to organize my work and to leave myself notes in the workspace. So it's a little bit like commenting your code if you were to write code, but it's a very visual tool. So the way this process works is this tool here on the left, here I'm reading in an Excel file. here I'm doing, and each of these blue boxes is a transformer. So this is the extract, the E, I'm reading in data, and then I'm transforming that information. So my Excel file contains the IDs of the traffic counters in this city. And I'm taking today's date, today's month and year. And here there are two types of traffic counters, and they each produce different data that I'm going to go get on the web. So the data resides in Excel files on the web, but the name of the Excel file changes with each month. So if I want to be able to call this, I wanted to make the name of the file I'm going to get dynamic, which is why here I'm concatenating or combining the year, the month, the ID of the traffic counter, and then I'm doing the same thing to create a place to store it. So I have the two different types of traffic counters. So if you're traffic counter type A, you're going to follow the upper path, and if you're the other type of traffic counter, you're going to follow the lower path. Because the data inside these Excel files is transposed differently. So in one type of traffic counter, the Excel files, each hour with the traffic count is a row in the table, which is actually what we want in the end state. And then the other one, the traffic counter data, comes as columns. So we actually have to pivot the data, which is why we have two different paths. So I have my path, my URL to my traffic counter, and then I use this HTTP calling tool to actually download the URL. And this tool is interesting because it allows me to make any web call. So I can use it to call data from any REST service or any SOAP service. So it's a very, very popular way to go and get data dynamically from the web. I download the Excel files, I read in the data, and then here I normalize the data so that it meets the output format I want at the end. So that's why I have a section here called normalize. So I'm renaming fields. I'm making sure one of them, the hours start at 0, the others, they start at 1. I have to do a little bit of work to make the data line up together so I can put all of the traffic count data into one SQL Server database. So here I'm actually checking if the data already exists or not, and then at the end I'm writing to the database. So originally this process that we helped somebody create was actually done with, a utility to download the data, and then another set of VBA scripts that were kind of reworking the data in Excel. And we replaced all of that with this process, which runs in about 2 minutes. So, instead of a process being able to, be run once a week or maybe once a month as was happening, it could be run, hourly as the data is being updated. The data afterwards in SQL is picked up by a dashboarding tool, and there are dashboard statistics that are made for it. So I create this data process, and I can run it on the desktop application by hitting the run button. But I can also publish it to FME Server if I want to automate around the tool. So FME Server is and that kind of automation is what we'll go on to talking about next. So people use FME to build all kinds of data workflows in the GIS and municipal space. There's a lot of nightly tasks that, cross-reference data between different systems. So it could be pulling in permit data and, joining it with, parcels. It could be pulling tax data and new parcel data and combining it together. Sometimes we use it just simply to do data validation. So validate data in certain tables or in certain sources and then produce reports. There's a large number of things that people want to automate data processes around. So I'll just get back into my PowerPoint. So what is FME Server? So we saw what the desktop is. I built a data workflow using my boxes and arrows, and I have something created, but now I want to deploy it somehow. So that's what I use FME Server for. So it allows me to, trigger data processes to happen automatically and also to manage that. So if I have 100 automated data processes, it gives me a place to centralize them and to manage them. Make sure that they're running and get notifications if things go wrong. So what can I do with FME Server? I could build Selfserve data processes. So a self-serve process would allow somebody who doesn't have the FME software to obtain the results of, running a data process. So perhaps it's extract an Excel file that has all the hydrants that were inspected yesterday. It could be all kinds of data processes. That would be an example of self-serve. So the idea of the end user who wants the data triggering the job to run itself. I can also schedule tasks. So while with the desktop, I could run a batch file and have a Windows task scheduler automatically run jobs. I have to make sure the machine is on. I have to make sure the job actually ran. With FME Server, it gives me a centralized place, and I can have notifications built in to sort of know that I could let the process run on its own and only have to worry if something has actually gone wrong. And then there's also event-driven actions. So an event-driven action would be an example of a file arriving in a folder triggering a job to run. So we'll look at some of these different kinds of examples. So deliver self-serve data access. So the idea here being that a user can actually choose when they want the data and when they run the process. So we often do this, when we have either, a very specific process that serves a group of people, or it could be in the case sometimes where it's, we have another web interface and the person is in, maybe an ArcGIS, online map or something, and then they hit a button and it runs a specialized data process that, either produces a report or extracts specific data for them or updates something on the back end or something like that. So the idea being that we can, allow users to obtain the data when they need it. So we're not trying to pre-anticipate when they need it. We don't have to be, us as the creators of the data process, we don't have to be running the process to give the results to people. They're able to get it on their own. I can control who has access to which process with the FME server, which gives me, a measure of security. The users don't have to have FME on their software. They interact with FME server through a web page. And I can also monitor the usage of my service. So if I see there's a lot of requests for the data, that might impact, how I'm offering the service. I can improve, availability of the service. This gives me more options by knowing who ran which data process when. It gives me some interesting information that I could see how also information is moving in my organization, who's using it, who's consuming it. And as we go forward and people start to do, more BI and more integration of data from different applications, this becomes kind of important. How is the data moving? Are people using the up-to-date data? Are they using the right data in the organization? So this kind of gives me a measure of understanding how information is moving through the organization. So I'm just going to show what FME Server looks like. So here I'm logged in as the super administrator. So I have a view of everything that FME Server can do, but I can create user logins that allow, a limited view, limited access to just run jobs. Me as the administrator, I can administer the server. I can publish data processes to the server, and I can also run the jobs, but I can give somebody access only to run jobs, and they would have a limited view of what they see here. So people usually use the FME Server Interface directly if they're trying to serve simple jobs that serve a small number of people rather than develop a whole web application. But there's also, people will also use, like the REST, FME Server REST interface to allow another application to, run a job on demand as well. So we would, hook it up with a nice web map or something like that that person's making several options for. So to run a job in on-demand mode, my user can come to choose which folder that job is in. I can select a particular data process, and that data process might come with several options. Those options are determined by the person who authors the job. So they decide which parameters or what options I can have to run the job. So in this case, for instance, I am allowed to choose, which data layers I'm interested in. I can choose which format I want to extract the data in, and I can even throw in a min-max XY and what output coordinate system I want. And then I can hit run, and I can run my data process. Here I ran the data process alone as is, and it produced my data and ran it somewhere. But if I run the same job and choose the data download service, this will actually normally give me a link to download the data, which it didn't this time, and I don't know why. Here I can see in jobs, my jobs that are completed, I can actually see the results. So I can actually look here, I can actually see, so as the administrator, I can see everything that went on in the task, everything that went on in the data process. So if I have any red X's, that would mean a job that had failed. In this case, my jobs were successful. So that's an example of running a job on demand. Like I said, the output could be, if I choose data download, it should actually send me the results directly to the user. Here we go. I just didn't run it right the last time. And here I can download the zip file as a result. So here I have a data process, and when I choose to run it with the data download, it actually sends me the results directly, which is an interesting option if you have, especially like small jobs that produce reports for people or very specific data sets for people. They can choose data download and they just get their package delivered right to them when it's ready. They can even choose, instead of waiting for the job to complete, they can even choose to have, an email send them the link when the data is ready. We have another example of self-serve, but using the FME server's REST interface. So everything that I can do in this page that I've shown can also be accessed by the REST service of FME server. And what that means is I can have another application call it. So if I just go to this site, HTTP, let me see if it's going to cooperate with me. So here's an example of, this is a GeoCortex map on an Esri platform. And this city uses FME server as a backend to serve data out. In this case, if developers are interested in a very small area of land, they really just want a clipped out area of a very particular package to start their development project. So they can come and select the layers that they're interested in, and choose to draw an area of interest. Choose the format that they want, the coordinate system that they want, and enter this thing to make sure they're not a robot. I always fail, although I'm not a robot, so I don't know how that works. Here I have to confirm my email. JRV. Hopefully that's right. And when the package is ready, I'll get an email with this data clipped out in a DWG, which is what I asked for. So I just want a very small package. Maybe I'm not super knowledgeable about GIS data. I just want a simple AutoCAD file. Some of our clients actually use this to create very specific. This one will output a very simple AutoCAD file, but we have some that will actually put data out in a very specific layering standard with block symbology and representing the data in the city's CAD standard. So it makes a very, very like CAD looking CAD drawing that kind of matches usually what developers or engineers want to start with to start the design process. So that's, an example. So in this case, we're in an Esri environment. We're drawing our window. And when I hit that button, a request gets pushed with all this information to the FME server that runs a job on demand and then emails me back the result. So it's just another way we can look at on demand. So sometimes the users are, sometimes FME server is just in the background and nobody even ever sees that it's there. The idea of FME server is honestly to automate as much data processing on the back end as possible to allow more time for, analysis, data creation and other kind of tasks that require, hands-on skills. You can also do self-serve via via an app as well. So these same data processes, I can actually publish them to an FME server app. So from a cell phone, I could actually run a data process. I don't have my phone hooked up to my viewing tool today, so I can't show that, but it is another interesting option to run a job, and you could get a stream back. So you might get an HTML back, or you might get a PDF or something like that streamed back to your device as a result of running the data process. So that was on demand. Another thing we can often do with FME Server, and this is probably by far the most popular usage of FME Server, is to manage scheduling of all the data processes. A lot of people will start with FME Desktop, create a bunch of data processes, but then they want a way to make sure they ran at the right time, to make sure they didn't fail, they produced the right result, and to have some sort of notification if something goes wrong. So we'll have some clients, especially in the municipal space, who might have upwards of 60, 70 jobs that run daily, most of them at night, but some of them will run jobs hourly. Some will run jobs every few minutes. So depending on how fast, how real time we need the data to move. And that depends on a number of factors, basically usually like the business process for that particular data. So scheduling is used heavily in this kind of situation. So it could be, when it's, up to the minute. It might be somebody who's pulling data from, ArcGIS Tracker and doing some sort of geoprocessing with it and then pushing a result out quickly. It could be pulling data from a weather feed or any kind of data feeds or REST service, but you need to capture and modify that data to do some integration or to do some analysis in your BI tools or something like that. It could be integrating data nightly, text data, parcel informations to create derived data layers that show parcels with some ownership information, things like that. These are really popular examples that people use. So here's an example of a scheduled task that we have that we did a project with a client, and so they use City View as a planning application, so to manage their permits, and they use ArcGIS Enterprise for their GIS data. So they have a parcel layer, and they also have a layer of the parcels that are being built in the different development projects. This is actually a very, very small town, but they will double in the next 10 years. So they have people moving into houses nearly daily, and they needed a way to track that across the organization. They didn't have a way to know across the organization how fast the development was moving. So, and different departments needed different kinds of information in order to do their job. So they ended up using scheduled tasks with FME Server in order to facilitate this. So every night they do an integration of these new parcels with the occupancy permits to produce a layer of permits that of properties that have been moved into. So the ones that you see in green versus the ones that are brown, which are the ones that are either under construction or yet to be built. They also added another layer for the fire department because of the fire break lots, because they're doing heavy amounts of development. They need to. The fire department actually assigns properties you're not allowed to build on until all surrounding properties have been built out in order to prevent construction fires. So, different kinds of information. So they produce this new GIS layer that they, publish a map to that's available to all the different departments in the city, because before only the planning department could tell if they looked something up in their planning application if which houses had been moved into. So this is kind of their daily dashboard of all the development projects and which houses are being moved into. To give an example of how this information can be really important, the other branch that you see here that says extraction reports and goes to Excel and HTML is because the Parks Department, for instance, they said the map was really interesting, but actually what they needed, they wanted just simply an Excel file with what percentage along the way was each development. Because when a development project reached 50%, they wanted to go and be able to approach developers and start asking for, the money or when was the park going to be built and things that had been promised within the development project. And before they had difficulty leveraging this because it was difficult for them to obtain these kinds of statistics and this kind of information without going through a painstaking effort of going and asking, the permitting department to extract certain information for them. Now they have a report on a weekly basis and they're able to show up with all their information, all their ducks in a row and move, conversations along way more efficiently. They also produce another HTML report that shows globally, and this is for, higher level people in the city, the capacity of the existing sewer system, how many units can go in versus how many units are being built out so they can track how close they're getting so they know when they're going to have to start to look at, alternative solutions, either a new system or work with a neighboring city and things like this. So it's interesting how, before all that information was locked into one application, but now very simply in a graphical way, they're able to kind of, push the information out to who needs it, but also in the way that those people need it. So how does the scheduling look and work in FME Server? Basically, I can come to I come to the schedules and I can say create a new schedule for me, and this could be the planning integration daily. Let's say make a category. I can say repeat on interval. I could say once per day. I could do start immediately. I have a number of options. I can do it, however seconds or hours or days or weeks. And I can select, where is my job? So I'll select my permits integration process. I have some parameters here to tell it where the data is. My data is actually, so I'm going to point to where my data is. My data could be somewhere in my organization. My data could be, an enterprise database. In this case, I have uploaded data to keep things simple. City planning, and what am I asking for? This SQLite. So I'm going to tell it where the permits database is. Normally, this would be an enterprise database, like an SQL server. In this case, for demo purposes, we had to kind of make a pre-extracted data. What am I looking for? City data, or am I looking for GIS data? Okay. GIS data, say OK. And I could plug in some notifications. If I want to get an email, if it fails, for instance, I could connect to a notification. And when it's done, I said start, it's done. I'm going to click OK. And now I have a scheduled task in my list, and the scheduled task is active. So I can activate them or deactivate them. And then I can, I have a number of options on how to manage these. Some people will just come every morning to the completed, browse through, and if they see any, ask to filter based on, job failures. And if they see any job failures, then they deal with it. Other people want an email immediately if a job failure happens. The idea is that you have a number of ways you can actually manage this. So as you see, my job ran and it ran successfully. And I know that this was run based on a schedule in particular, rather than running based on an on-demand task. So I know how the jobs have been run, who's run them, what time, how long it took to run. So I have a way to kind of manage the data moving in my organization. So the last topic, event-driven actions. The idea of event-driven actions, this is a new notion to FME Server 2019, and the idea is to build an automation, but in a graphical way. So so I can have something will trigger, a process to run, and I can use actually boxes and arrows similar to how I build my data process to build the automation around my data process. So what does that look like? So if I come to the automation section, I can say build an automation. I'm going to do create new. So something is going to trigger my job to run. So in this little case here, this is actually another, part of that same project where, we had the integration between the permits data and parcels. And that gave us a lot of, information that different people in the organization needed. But the people installing the water meter said, well, wait a second, we're installing water meters every day and we want to see our progress on the map. So they said, we want to see the new water meters. And they were capturing that data using Excel, but it could be data in Collector or somewhere else. And maybe you want to do something to that data. So in this case, I could say, they had data coming in on Excel files. So what we did is we said, we made a directory watcher. I'm going to create a folder actually for it before I do this. And I'm going to create it on the server in this case. And I'm going to ask it to watch that folder for new files. So I'm going to come here. And I'm going to say directory modified. I'm going to say, what directory are you going to watch? It's going to watch the water meter. It could be a directory on my network. In this case, it's a directory on my FME server because it's faster to build. Watch subdirectories, no. Do I want to know if there's a folder? No, it's just going to be a file. Am I watching for create, modify, or delete? I'm going to watch for create. And how often am I going to poll? So here, like for example's sake, I'm going to poll every 15 seconds. I'm going to do validate. And it looks like it's happy. I'm going to do apply. So now I have a directory watcher. So now, okay, a file comes in. What am I going to do? Well, maybe I'm going to say filter. And maybe I'm just going to make sure that I'm filtering. My Excel files should be called water meter. I'm just going to cheat a little bit and check what my files are called. So it should contain the word water meters. Oh no, value to filter. So I'm gonna, oops. Oh no. Action. Okay, so it's going to be filter. And I'm going to filter the file path. So when the new file arrives in the directory watcher, it'll contain the name of that file, and I'm going to pass it to the filter. And it needs to contain the string water meters. And if it does, then I want it to run my workspace. And I'm going to pick the workspace I've already published to the FME server, which is my water meters installation 3. And I'm going to say the Excel file, the name of it, is going to be that file path that came in over here. So it's going to capture the file path of the new file that came in, go through the filter. If it contains the word water meters, I'm going to run the workspace. And I'm going to give it the rest of the information it wants to know. I'm going to do apply. So now if I could keep adding actions, or I could say, for now, this is all I want, but I could add a notification. actually. So if I could say, if it fails, send an email. And we have Office 365. I need to connect to a legitimate account using Office 365. And I'll fill in the options it wants. Failure. I could have a more catered email text. I could forward the file on, or I could do something like that. But in the interest of time, so here I have my automation. I can start it, and it's going to want me to save it. So now it's running. So what I can do is I can go to my full file folder that I had created to receive my data. Resources, data, water meters, and I can go and drop one of my files in here, and I'll be able to see my job run fairly soon, probably, because I put a 15-second delay. So here I can see in the log that it's it actually ran the job and it found the file, and that it's polling every 15 seconds. So the idea is just that now I can build all kinds of automation. So the idea is, in a graphical way, I'm able to chain a whole bunch of actions together. I could have different jobs run. If job 1 is successful, run job 2. And so it allows me to create more data processes that are complex in the background. So, just to wrap up, what we wanted to show today was how FME Server can allow you to manage, data processes by allowing different kinds of automation. So either an on-demand way, so allowing users to get data when they need it, or scheduling tasks, or allowing other applications. So between the REST service and the automations, I can have a file, it could be a file arriving a folder that triggers a job. It could be something arriving from an Amazon web service that triggers a job. It could be a webhook in another application. So, a growing popular example of this is pulling data from one application using an API. You receive the JSON or the XML, you have to rework it to push it into the API of another application. So this is the kind of, applications that we're seeing people build. So we're just about out of time now. So I don't know if you have any questions, but if you do, you can feel free to type them in the question pane, and we'll get back to you guys.
All right, thank you very much, Leslie. Thank you, everyone. We actually just have a question, and I was answering it, but might as well do it out loud. Will this presentation be available to share? Sorry, will this presentation be available to share? Yes, it will, absolutely. You should get the recording as soon as I'm done editing it. So probably by the end of the day, or maybe tomorrow, you should have it, and it will be on our website too. So everyone will be able to access it. So if you have any other questions, now is the time, as I'm going to conclude quickly. So make sure, if you're interested in learning more about FME Server, make sure to register to the webinar series that I posted the link in the Q&A section. We just had our first episode last week on it was an introduction to automations, and the next episode will be on schedules, which Leslie talked a bit during this presentation, but it will be on November 6th, and we'll go more in details. So the presentation is not about doing it like a sales pitch or anything, but it's really opening the software and making sure you guys understand like all the possibilities and all the automations you can do in FME Server. So you can actually watch the first episode right now of the series on our website too in the webinar section. So if you have any questions, you can ask them, or you can email them directly to Leslie. You have her email address on the screen right now. So maybe we'll wait a minute or so.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you, Leslie. All right, so I guess you were really clear with your presentation, Leslie. There's no questions coming in right now. So thank you everyone for being here. And we hope to see you on our next episode, not next episode, but on the next episode of the webinar series.